So you want a quick summary of how your project meets its goals and what sort of risks it faces along the way and how you're going to measure the project meeting those goals. In this video, I'm going to look at the Logframe or logical framework approach to summarizing a project. Now I know Logframes can be used in a different context in defining a project, but I found it most useful for summarizing. So in this video, I'm going to share how I've used Logframes to summarize a project. I'm going to go through a bit of example as well in terms of making coffee. To get started with, the inputs you'd be looking for to create a log frame. So I'm going to take you through step by step how to create a log frame. So the inputs that you'd use to create your log frame would be at the very minimum, the goals and the outcome or purpose for your project. Now that's about it. You can define and derive everything else within the log frame. And this is typically how it's used, where you've got some sort of overarching goal or vision that your program or project is trying to achieve or trying to implement. And then you go through and define further the outcomes and purpose, the outputs that you're going to get or deliverables and the activities you're going to do or methodology. So I've seen a lot of parallels here with the log frame approach to some of the other work that I've done in terms of defining a project and communicating it. That's what this channel is about, creating solutions, defining them, and then communicating them with other people. So I've explored the log frame as a communications tool to help communicate complex problems simply to other people. Starting with the goal and the outcome or the purpose, the basics of the log frame is this 4-column approach of what your project summary is, what sort of measurements, your indicators of the project, how you're going to verify each of those, and then some of the risks or assumptions that have been involved. To go through that, the easiest way is to start by filling out each column downwards, and then checking that you're going through the right process by verifying upwards using a few if statements, they're called by the guys that came up with this. So to go through that, you'd start by filling out the project summary, a high-level goal, and then looking at the outcome or purpose of this project in terms of meeting that goal. Typically, I've called this, in other projects, this might be called a vision to begin with, and then the objective of this one project. So if you have a program, a series of projects, that would be where the goal comes from. Alternatively, you can have just one project with its high purpose, and then the outcome listed below that. Then to list the outputs, so this might also be called deliverables. What sort of things are going to come out of the project? Is it going to be a report, or is it going to be a drawing, or is it going to be, in my case, a cup of coffee? That would be your outputs. And then your activities, which can also be called your methodology, is how you're going to achieve those. So that's the project summary. Now, one of the downsides I've found with the log frame method is that you tend to bind yourself to the rows as you go through this. So now that we come to fill out the indicators, we'd be looking at the indicators that meet the goal, which can be perhaps not the best approach, particularly when we get to risks, as some of these rows might have multiple risks and we're kind of limiting ourselves to one. But as a high-level summary, it does give you an idea of how you're going to meet your goals, your outcomes, your output, and your activities by indicators, how you're going to verify those indicators, and what risks are involved in that. After going through and defining at a high level, the summary, goal, purpose, output, and activities, you can check that by going back and saying, if we do these activities, will we meet this output? If we do this output, will we meet our purpose? If we meet our purpose, will we meet our goal? And that's how you can go down by defining it and then up by checking it with an if. So then moving on to the indicators, we look at what indicators indicate our goal, and then what indicators indicate our purpose, what indicates our output, what indicates our activities. And we say, okay, if we measured these indicators for the activity, will it measure the activity? Will it measure the output? Will it measure the outcome or purpose? And will it measure the goal? So to check on the way back up like that. And then the same for verification, to list down how are we going to verify that we're meeting our goal? Or how are we going to verify these indicators? How are we going to verify these indicators? How, and how? So the verification is how sort of proof or evidence of how we're checking that and what we're doing to check it. So I did another video previously on one method of verification and validation called the V model. This is more of an engineering application, but this channel is all about sharing the tools that I've learned as an engineer to be used to solve any problem. So if you're interested in checking out that video on the V model, I'll leave a link in the comments below, so check that out. So then after going through the verifications, again doing that, if this verifies the indicator for activities, does that go up? Then come to risks. So to list out the risks in meeting our goal, to list out the risks in meeting our purpose, to list out the risks in meeting our output, and to list out the risks in meeting our activities. So sometimes these are called assumptions, and some of the material, so in putting this video together, I did a bit of research into where else log frames are used, and they can be used in defining, I saw them as a useful method for defining charitable projects. But sometimes these risks or assumptions are referred to as external ones, or what sort of external factors can influence the project. But I've found that typically risks can be internal as well. And so I wouldn't discount external risks to meeting your project goals or project outcomes. It is something that you should be aware of, that there can be internal risk as well. And how you define internal and external, it really depends on whether it's something that my interpretation is whether it's something the project team is doing or whether it's something that happens to the project team. And internal risks should be considered too, as far as I'm concerned anyway. If you're looking to use this to summarize your own problems, whoever you're presenting this to may also be interested in hearing about those external risks. So the outcome you get at the end is this great table that summarizes the whole project. It summarizes what the project is trying to achieve, how the project's going to achieve it, how you're going to measure that the project is achieving it, how you're going to verify your results, and what sort of risks the project might face. And they're really the important parts of a project when you're presenting a summary to someone. So this is all about communicating that summary of the project. So I'll run through an example as well, where our objective here is to make more great tools like this, to provide more helpful guides for people to be able to create solutions to complex problems, to define those solutions, and then to communicate them to other people. So that's our goal here for this project, to produce more helpful guides for people. Now, what's the purpose of, so that's our program of works. Now, what's the purpose of this project? Is to keep me awake. So if I'm awake, I can produce more guides like this. So that's me. I've tried to draw myself with a smiley face because I'm going to be awake here. In this project, how do we keep me awake? We use coffee. So coffee is my favorite way, apart from sleep, for staying awake. So that's going to be the output of our project. And how are we going to get me coffee? We're going to make it. So we're going to make coffee. Now, what are our indicators of achievement here? So to see what sort of measurements we can use. So these should be things that are measurable or qualitative or quantitative. So things that could be put on a scale of good to bad, for example, or things that could be measured 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5 per week, or some sort of count of measurement like that. So in this case, to produce, our goal being to produce more helpful guides for people, well, we can measure the number of guides per week. That could be a good way to measure that. Now, there is no measurement on quality that I put in there. Please like this video because that's the measure of quality I'll be using. So please hit that thumbs up button. Then the measurement that we're going to use for the awakeness of Chris, my name's Chris, by the way. The measurement that we're going to use is a judgment of awake. So somewhere on the scale of asleep to very awake. Our measurement on coffee is the number of coffees, and our measurement on the activity of making coffee is the input ingredients, the beans and the water. Okay, so the verification of that, so how do we verify then? I like to do this verification step on the indicators of achievement, because that way you can show to someone else that these indicators are meeting this part of the project, and we're verifying that these indicators are correct. So how do we verify the correctness of these indicators? For the case of number of guides per week, we could just take the count from YouTube. For the judgment of how awake I am, we can fill out a survey. So they don't have to be strictly qualitative indicators. It could be something like a survey where you just put a judgment of ask some questions of your stakeholders, like how awake are you? So that's the verification method for me being awake, could be a survey. Then the verification method for the number of coffees could be the count of coffees. I tried to draw a table here, but you can see it didn't work quite well. That's supposed to be the absence of cups on the table, which shows how many coffees have been consumed. And then a measurement for our activities, because these activities are the input information, could be a guide of how much is left in the top. So how much of the beans and water are left. So some of the risks to, then outlining some of the risks to this project. So what sort of risks could stop us meeting our goal? Let's say I drank too much coffee. I'm over-caffeinated and that's led to distraction. Well, that would stop us reaching our goal. So then what would stop us reaching our outcome or purpose? Me being awake? Well, the coffee's ineffective. I mean, if you haven't slept at all, coffee can only do so much. So coffee being ineffective could be a risk as well. Then what sort of risk do we face to the output of coffee, to the delivery of the coffee? Well, what if we spilt it on the table? Then we wouldn't be able to drink it. So spilt coffee being a risk for that output. And then the activity of making the coffee, well, what happens if the machine is broken? Then we can't make the coffee. If you're interested in more details of how I identified those risks, hit subscribe. I've got some videos coming up soon on risk identification. So if you hit subscribe, YouTube will notify you of those as they become available. So that's the basic summary of how to communicate a project using the Logframe method. Overall, I found it quite a good way to summarize a project, but I wouldn't call it a very good definition. So I know some people like to use Logframes to define a project in terms of its goals, its outcomes, its output and activities, or alternatively, its vision, its objective, its deliverables and its methodology. Though I feel that that's missing some key information, particularly stakeholders. So I feel that in this whole process of creating the Logframe, I haven't considered stakeholders enough, which is something that I typically expect to cover in a project summary. So that's why I use Logframes as a communication tool instead, because by communicating these parts of the project to different people, you are involving the stakeholders. You can give them a chance to comment. You can write the Logframe in terms of the issues of that stakeholder, or you can I don't know, phrase risks sensitive to that stakeholder's concern. So if you're interested more in how I look at stakeholders and their issues, please hit subscribe as well, because there'll be a video coming up about that soon. If you have any questions or comments about working with Logframes, please leave a comment below and I'll see what I can do about getting back to you. Otherwise, I hope to see you in the next video.